Good morning, students. We are taking the topic of ecology today, and I want you to know that it's a very important topic in this course, General Biology 1. The course code remains Bio 111. Ecology is the study of interactions among organisms in relation to their environments. We can say it is the study of interactions between living factors and non-living factors in the environment. It's very important for you to take note that the living factors of the environment are biotic factors, while the non-living factors are abiotic factors. So it means that there must be an interaction between the biotic factors and the abiotic factors. And as a result of that, we see it as something very important to study in the area of biology. Examples of non-living factors are light, water, wind, nutrients, heat, solar radiation, atmosphere. We can see that these factors have no living, they are non-living. And for the living factors, examples are plants, animals, and microorganisms. Ecosystem is the basic functional unit of ecology. When we are talking of the ecosystem, we are talking of the relationship between organisms and the environment within a particular region or space. So we are saying that in an ecosystem, usually there is a relationship between the living organisms and the non-living environment in a particular geographical region. An ecosystem, therefore, consists of biological community that occurs in some locale alongside the physical and chemical factors that make up its non-living environment. A typical example of ecosystem are freshwater ponds, deserts, forests, estuary, ocean. Like I said earlier on, the two major components of ecosystem are the living factors and non-living factors. The living factors are biotic factors and the non-living factors are abiotic factors. Biotic components in an ecosystem are grouped into three. We have, based on their classification, we have the plants, which happens to be the producers. The producers are autotrophs. We have the animals, which are consumers, and we have the microorganisms, which are decomposers. Producers are able to produce their food themselves through the process of photosynthesis. All green plants, for instance, trees, are producers. Some microorganisms or some organisms like algae, like the cyanobacteria, are also producers. The consumers are also referred to as heterotrophs. These are a group of organisms that cannot manufacture food themselves, but must depend on the autotrophs to be able to survive. The heterotrophic organisms are grouped into three. We have the primary consumers, the secondary consumers, and the tertiary consumers. Examples of primary consumers are the herbivores. They are the plant-eating organisms, such as insects, rats, goats, deer, cow, sheep, and so on and so forth. We have a lot of herbivores. They are the organisms that feed on plants directly. The secondary consumers are primary carnivorous. They are carnivores because they feed on the primary consumers. And this group of organisms are frogs. Examples are frogs, snakes, lizards, small birds, and so on and so forth. Then we have the tertiary consumers. These are a group of organisms that can be seen as the secondary carnivores. They feed on secondary consumers. For instance, hawk can feed on chickens, eagles can feed on lizards, tiger, lions can feed on secondary carnivores, and that makes them a tertiary consumer. Decomposers are responsible for the decay of dead organic matter. These examples of decomposers are bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. And we see that what they do is that they ensure that the organism, whether plants or animal, gets decay, and then from that nutrients are released in form of organic compounds. The nutrients are also being used by producers for synthesis of their food. Now, ecosystems are of various kinds. We have the natural ecosystem, and this is an ecosystem that is found under natural conditions. And examples of such ecosystem, we have the terrestrial ecosystem. Terrestrial ecosystem has to do with ecosystem that can be found on land. Examples of such terrestrial ecosystem are the grassland ecosystem, forest ecosystem, desert ecosystem. For the aquatic ecosystem, we have examples of freshwater ecosystem, which under the freshwater ecosystem, there is the running water ecosystem, for instance, the river, the spring, and we have standing water ecosystem, for instance, the lake and the ponds. We also have marine ecosystem, which has some level of source concentrations, such as the sea and the seashore. Functions of an ecosystem. Ecosystems have their primary function, and the primary function is to produce food through the process of photosynthesis. They have secondary function, which has to do with distribution of energy from one consumer to the other, from the autotroph to the heterotrophs. And we have the tertiary ecosystem, which the tertiary function of the ecosystem, which has to do with the decomposition of all dead organisms. The flow of energy in an ecosystem is very important. The essence of an ecosystem is for all organisms to obtain their food, and the second essence is for energy flow to occur in the ecosystem. So energy is most essential for all living organisms, and the primary source of energy on Earth is the solar system, which ensures the release of chemical energy for all plants through the process of photosynthesis. The chemical energy which is obtained or which is used by plants is then being converted to other organisms once they are able to feed on plants. And energy enters, like I said earlier on, through the process of photosynthesis and goes to, which happens to take place on the first tropic level and moves on to other tropic level. The flow of energy follows the law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but can be converted from one form to another. For instance, the solar energy can be converted to chemical energy in plants. Chemical energy can be converted to heat energy in some other organisms, can be converted to sound energy in some other organisms, can be converted to kinetic energy or potential energy in some other organisms. Now, the second law of thermodynamics states that whenever energy is transformed, there is a loss of energy through the process of heat. And that will move us to another subtopic, which is this food chain. The food chain has to do with has to do with the process of eating and being eaten in an ecosystem. And through that process, there is a transfer of energy from one organism to another. And at each level, potential energy is being released as heat. The food web is the interlocking pattern of various food chains in an ecosystem. The food web has to do with an interconnection between different organisms at each trophic level. So in the food web, there is a wider option of being fed by an organism, another wider option of being eaten by an organism. So at each tropical level, there could be like 3 or 4 organisms that can feed on that organism, and 3 or 4 different organisms that an organism can be fed upon. For instance, grass may be eaten by insects, rats, and deer at the um, at the second tropic level. At the third tropic level, insects, rats, and deer can be eaten by carnivores such as snake, fox, and tiger. So we are saying that in the food web, there is an interlocking of various food chains called food web. The significance of food chains and food web is the flow of energy and nutrient cycling taking place through them. And as a result of this, there is usually a maintenance of ecological balance. Thank you. Have a nice day.